Welcome back again, folks, to another episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. Matt and I are back again today, and today we are going to have another producer interview, I guess you could call it. We're glad to have Lamar Graber on from Indiana, Maple Lane Katahdins, and we're going to dig into his production system a little bit. And Lamar is also a universal feeder user, and we'd like to hear a little bit what he likes about the feeders and how he uses them. So, welcome, Lamar. Glad to have you on today.
Yeah, the Lamar Graber, Southern Indiana, and I got started in the sheep industry about 20 years ago. Dad would have owned the farm here ever since it was been in the mid 1900s, and we would have started with the cattle. We transitioned over. I was 14 years old. Dad, he sold out of the cattle. He threw me in head first on the lambs, and I learned as I went. It's been about 20 years with the Katahdin. We ran about 130 ewes, registered Katahdin ewes. And then I also, as the time went on, I always would go over to the local sale barn. That's where I had started selling some of my lambs. And the market there wasn't, I would say, pretty modest. Then the sheep market kind of takes a tumble from year to year compared to good. And I kind of got frustrated at the time with the market not being real good. So I started, reaching out further, looking at slaughterhouses, other places to sell, which is definitely recommended to any of you guys that are, growing out lambs or raising lambs. Because there is normally some good markets out there. And the local sale barn there, continued to be a little bit on the modest end of things. And that's what kind of got me in to buying these 30-pound, 40-pound feeder lambs and growing them out. And this would be a total different location from where I do breeding.
Yep.
So that's where we're at today. We run the about 130 head of registered Katahdin ewes, and then I normally try to feed I try to stay under 400 head, and it's all an indoor, it's an old turkey barn style, and that's where we're here today.
Why don't we dig in a little bit to the production side a little bit, your registered flock. Just give us
Okay.
a brief rundown of like the cycle of a year, when you lamb, all that kind of stuff, where you lamb, inside, outside. Yeah, just give a rundown of that.
Yes, absolutely. So I turn my rams into my ewes. I've got like 5 different fields, and I'll run 4 rams. And that 5th field, sometimes I will just let empty, just that might be where I put them into, then switch them into when I take the rams out and put them all together. But I turn my rams in, so I don't do hardly any fall breeding or any feedering. It's all natural breeding. And I turn my rams in on July the 20th. I almost always have Christmas babies. My heat of my lambing will be from about January the 5th, 6th through about middle of February. But yeah, we so obviously collect all the numbers and turn out about 35 to 40 ewes per ram into the different fields. And we start that about, like I said, July the 20th, and I will let them in for 2 months. So when the lambing season comes in, we've got a little lean-to that I will always get ready for them. They're all together. It's lean-to is probably 250 foot long, but about 18 foot, and open to the south. And I lamb everything outside. And I spend a lot of time with them, because anybody who ever has lambed several ewes during lambing season, you will have mothers that are getting close to want to claim the others. But if you spend a lot of time with them over that time, I'll check on them 5 to 6 times a day. And we will not get them in until they have, dropped all their water in their afterbirth. to keep the inside little gates that I have individually in another barn till I tag them and give them their first dose of CD&T, and I will put them back outside about 2 weeks of age. But I do lamb outside, like in the lean-to, and then once they are lambed and the mother is settled there, I will take the lamb carriers out and they follow me into the barn.
So when you say lambed outside, that is outside. Is this a pasture or a dry lot that is adjacent to this lean-to?
So it is in the lean-to. There is concrete. There is concrete, and it's got a small slab of concrete right on the outside. But then they've got a big barn lot of lime and old old rocks that old foundation, or that it was rocks would have been one time of where the cattle used to be.
Gotcha.
It's
So
fairly solid, so
yeah, so it's outside, but they do have the ability to go under the roof.
they do have the ability to go underneath the lean-to at
Yeah.
any time. Yes.
And then when you say you take them inside, they are going into another building or an adjacent building or something, and that's where they spend the first 2 weeks.
It is an enclosed old turkey barn, about 300-foot long turkey barn that I fully enclose. I've got one little fan system in there that if I start smelling a little bit of ammonia, I can turn it on for an exhaust out. But yeah, it is a turkey barn where I will make about 60 individual 8x8 pins out of the aluminum. I got some aluminum gates here.
Okay.
So when they're inside, they're penned just with their lambs the whole time. Is that correct?
Yes, but I will have at some points, I've got access to all kinds of sawdust here, so I can keep it very dry. But sometimes I can get 3, like if they really, really crowd me, I can get like 3 ewes to that 8x8 pin comfortably till they're at that 2 weeks. Because I personally, on my routine, I don't like giving their first CD&T at minimum at 2 weeks of age. I know there's a lot of people will, counter and say they don't want to give it until they're 4 weeks. Some guys don't want to give it until it's 6 weeks, but I do give the CD&T when I tag them at that first 2 weeks of age.
So and then they're going outside into the main flock then at that point, or do they go separate
yes.
flock once
Well,
they lamb?
I will then, when I turn back out, I will split that lean-to with gates. And then I start a lambed and not lambed yet area. Like I'll split that lean-to right in half, all the way down through there, all the way to and it will go up to my existing building that sits a long way in front of there. Yeah. And then I can split that, and then I'll have the lambs on one side that already lambed, and the mothers that still haven't on the other side.
That makes sense. I wondered if you would put them back in the same flock. It just makes it much easier to have your ewes that didn't lamb separate. You can keep a better eye on them.
Yep. And at 2 weeks, so they normally that's about when you first will notice, that lamb going up. If you give the mother some feed a little bit, which we do some feeding here. We're not all pasture. That's one thing I had forgot to let out. They have availability to the pasture at all times. But right now, we're not doing no graining at all. But like as the summer gets later and later in the grass, we're turning a little brown here in southern Indiana. Well, I'll start going out maybe graining my ewes, a half a pound per head, maybe 2-3 times a week. Very minimal graining this time of the year. And then I always grain a little bit during pregnancy, and always have mineral at all times.
Yeah.
Whether it's Durafirm, I use a lot of C90 mineral salt, and mineral at all times. That's a must for me. At one point, I did not do that, and I was starting to run into a little bit of a weak birthing lamb.
Yep.
And that almost immediately went away after at all. I mean, it is a must for me to have mineral there.
Yeah. When you have your ewes in the barn with their lambs, in those individual pens, how are you feeding them in there? Is that just dry hay you're throwing in, or how are you doing that?
Yes. So with the hay, it's all second cut and fescue. With the second cutting fescue and orchard grass, we have very very minimal weight.
Yeah, and your
And
your
my
second cutting tends to be a little bit higher feed value, to a little higher in
Yep,
protein.
f-
Depends on
feed
what
value and sugar. Yep.
stage it's
Mhm.
made, but yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. And normally, like I said, at 2 weeks you can see that lamb. She'll be, and when I will grain the ewe a little bit. I've got a little Cool Whip bowl that I will give to 2 ewes one time a day. That's the amount that I feed.
Yeah.
If a ewe has triplets, I'll work her to a full Cool Whip bowl one time a day. But if it's a set of twins or a single, it's one Cool Whip bowl, for 2 ewes in a pen.
This is while they're in the what I would call a jug.
Inside. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
And normally about at 2 weeks, that lamb will be up there eating with the mother.
yeah.
They'll be in there, nibbling around on it, what a healthy lamb will do. And then when I move them back outside, that's where my first universal feeder will be available to them.
Yeah.
So let's back up just a little. Sorry. Let's back up a little bit. What are you feeding in when you're in the jug? What's your grain going into? A bucket, or how are you doing that?
So yes, so I have my own, like where I work, we do some plastic welding. Okay, and I just had some scrap plastic around here. It's about a 9-inch by 9-inch square that's got a 3-inch lip, and
Okay.
I just grooved and welded those sides up to it's a little plastic bowl, and I've got about 100 of those little bowls there at home, and yeah, that's what I use for my feeding troughs.
And they
While
don't
they're
hang on.
inside, but
They don't hang on a gate or anything like that. They're just in
nope,
there on the
nope.
ground.
I will. Yep, I just they're on the ground, and then I've got a shepherd cane when I go down through the owls. I got owls, I can reach all the way to the back, pull it forward, hit it out if there's any hay or anything in it, and I'll just put it right there in front of the gate again and get my Cool Whip ball out of my bucket and throw. And it doesn't take long to feed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you're putting the hay, are you putting that on the ground, or do you got a little hay rack you're putting it in?
Hay net and hay racks. I'm like to transition into all nets. It is with the nets. You want the square net, for tag purposes. They can be a little bit of a tag yanker with the registration clocks, so might have to be a little bit careful with it on some of the hay nets. But I use still mostly it's hot dip galvanized 2x4 wire that I will put an upright on the center gate, and then I'll just make a little V out of it. And normally I will give, like we still feed all square bills here, and 2 ewes will get 1 cake of hay, chunk cake, I guess whatever you want to call it, the square bill.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that will be 2 times a day. That would be night and morning.
Right. So your comment on the hay net there, clarify that a little bit. What do you mean by square? Did you say
So some
square?
of the hay nets, some of the hay nets have the square design, and some have the triangular design.
Yep.
I tried the triangular design first. Now, so I don't know personally, that might have been designed for horses. I don't know that because I didn't know the difference in it. But regardless, it was a hay net, so I just put it out. Within a matter of 2 days, I had probably 14 ewes had yanked out their tags.
Wow.
On that triangular hay net. It was just like a tag magnet to me.
And
And
when you say triangular, are the holes triangular, or is the net or basket triangular?
that the holes of the net, it's actually like a diamond. Like it'll be,
Okay.
it's almost like a diamond shape.
Yep, I've seen them. Yep, now it's making sense.
Yep.
And so this net, do
Yep.
you just have it tied to the gate, or do you have a frame that holds it open, or how do you put hay in it? Because I went out and bought I went out and bought a small one for horses to experiment with, and I got frustrated really quick. Like it has a drawstring on the top, and yeah, how do you hold it open and get hay? I don't have time to mess around with
Yeah,
that. Like,
making a frame on the corner just so it doesn't reach the floor is the best way.
gotcha.
And you can make that frame out of treated lumber. You can go to your welding shop and get you something a little more expensive or welded, you know, to put it through on the slip holes on top. Still, most of my hay feeders are all the hot dip galvanized 2x4 wire hose to avoid waste.
So these lambs go out of the barn. Once they go out of these jugs, and you said they go outside into your split. Now under your lean-to, you have one half is waiting to lamb, and the other half has already lambed. And let's pick up from there. You said that's where you have your universal feeder.
So I will have my universal feeder. Yes, I'll put 2 gates up and set the gates like in just so the little ones can get in, like the creep feeder. You know, there's multiple ways how whatever you want to do to set up there. You know, mine is just set up with 2 gates. Every now and then, you know, I've seen guys already turn the gates upside down. You know, it's just however that you can do it to make just where the little lamb gets in on the creep feeder. But yes, I do have my first. That's where they will first start with the universal feeder, is right then there. Now, sometimes the lambs can be a little timid. If you have a problem for your lambs of going into your creep feeder after you make it, I do have for myself a solution that works very quick to getting a lamb into your creep feeder. You go find you some shavings, some dry sawdust, very fresh sawdust, you know, very fresh shavings, and you will put it by your hole. Put it right on the outside by your hole, lead it inside, and put it around your creep feeder or your universal feeder, whatever you have. But I don't know what it is about dry sawdust. It's almost an immediate effect to work to draw your lambs to it.
That's interesting. I have noticed that if I put some fresh hay in the creep pen, I thought it felt like the lambs go sniffing at the bars and go through it quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've even experimented putting a heat lamp inside there because it'll draw them in.
Yeah, sawdust will do it. Sawdust will do it. Or pine shavings, you know, any kind of shavings that you have. It will, I mean, it's almost an immediate, like a lamb will always be a lamb. You put that down, they cannot go by that without stopping and nibbling on it and smelling it. It's just an attraction for them, you know.
That's an interesting tidbit. Yeah.
So your universal feeder, only the lambs have access to, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I will hand feed those, you know, every night. I'll continue to give them about no more than a pound per head per night.
Sounds like you need one more universal feeder yet.
I'm going to probably at some point. Yes, I'm definitely going to consider it. All my universal feeders that I have here is the small version. It's about 750 pounds. I'm not sure. I can't remember the number of that one.
It would be our 800.
Your 800, okay.
It holds about 800
I put about
pounds of
700.
shellcorn.
Yep. I have 5 of those, and I have them all that small. And you know, a lot of guys ask me, why don't you just get one big one? Well, I can manhandle this. You know, 5 or 2 people can manhandle this. Drag it around, pull it around. You can put it on your interloader scoop very easily. You know, I can pull it to the side a little bit if I'm there myself. You know, if it's empty, you know, I can just handle it a little better. And that's just what had worked the best for me was these number 800s. Yeah.
Yep.
But the lambs, I would draw them in there. So, and the settings on it when I draw the lambs in there is going to be pretty much wide open.
Right.
This is, you know, personally that I do it. I don't want to restrict the lambs at a young age. I want them to want more. So I will not restrict any of my lambs that, you know, that are on the milk. And I will pretty much turn it wide open. And like I said, a lot of guys, you know, do grass only. I have nothing against that. You know, it's whatever whatever works for you,
Sure.
is always my recommendation. Some things will work for a fella, or it won't work here. It's just, I always say you keep doing what's working for you.
Yep. So what's
When
your
they get
ration
older,
look like?
so my ration is a very simple mix. I never feed, like, the protein is 11.9%. It's sheep pellet, the 36% sheep pellet, cracked corn, a little bit of oats, just a little bit of oats, and molasses, and then I put a little bit of, I think it's like 20 pounds per ton of soybean oil, for just like, it's just got carries a little smell to it, and just a little bit of extra fat content to it.
Sure.
But yeah, I've got a very simple feed mix, and I feed that to my lambs, to my ewes, to my feeder lambs that I buy. I have the same mix at all levels, and I never change.
That makes it convenient. Yeah.
It does, and it feeds well with the cracked corn and the sheep pellet, and I have minimal fines in it.
Yeah,
Feeds
those oats
very
in
very
there.
well in the universal feeder.
The oats in there probably really help you out too. So a trick the Australians taught me is they said if you put even I feel like if you put 300 to 400 pounds of oats in with your shelled corn, let's say you're feeding shelled corn,
Mm-hmm.
I think it keeps your lick groove cleaner and you can regulate with a little bit more precision because the oats do two things. They suck up moisture in the lick area in that lick groove between the two adjuster
Yeah,
bars, and they
yeah,
also absorb moisture from the animal's tongue. Like if you're trying to restrict now with your lambs there that are on their moms yet, you're not limit feeding at all, so it doesn't really
yeah.
matter there. But if you're trying to limit or control the amount of intake, having some oats or barley in that mix, I feel like gives you a little bit better control over your intake.
And another
Doesn't
thing
plug
with
the
the
feeder
oats,
up, doesn't plug the feeder
I,
up as quick, and it also dries their tongue out quicker compared to straight shelled corn. Shelled corn has that shiny, smooth surface. It doesn't absorb much moisture.
yep, I can
So,
definitely confirm to that. Yes. Hmm. And I would have, like, another thing with the oats, for me personally, is when you're starting these lambs, if you have a high amount of cracked corn or whole corn, whatever you are feeding, if you have it in your feed, you can get them to, I don't know, if they won't like die from overeating, but you'll see them come down with a little diarrhea right when they uptake that feed amount to them. You'll see them come down with a little bit of a wet tail or so forth. I So I had tried it without oats prior in the past years, and I added my oats a little later, and I have noticed that I would have cut that almost in half. But I only, like, my amount of oats is like 250 pounds per ton. Like, I don't have very much at all, but
yeah,
it's
that's
still enough.
interesting.
It keeps my feeder, does very well on it, and like you said, it does do all that moisture, so you don't have that little layer there by the lip that will build up there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And
I'm surprised that that cracked corn works as good as it does, but probably because you have the oats in there is really helping you out.
yeah, yep, I've fed it for this mix. I've been feeding it probably about for 6 or 7 years now. 6 or 7 years, where I used to just, get whatever the local feed store had. But it's got, with the small community that we're in here, there's a lot of small sheep growers, and there's some larger sheep growers. Most of them growers and have transitioned over into this feed. And our local feed store actually calls it the lick feeder mix. So they have, you know, kind of grabbed a hold to it and now use it, because the lick feeders have really kind of taken off into this area, making our jobs easier on feeding time and so forth. And they actually, that's what the name of it is. If I have somebody says, calls me, says like, hey, what are you feeding? I'll tell them, hey, call this feed store and tell them that you want the lick feeder mix. That's what it's called. So yeah, we have a lot of guys that are using the lick feeders here, and I have not heard very many complaints. There's definitely no complaints from me.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. Any more questions you might have, Matt, on the production end of things?
I was curious, how long are you leaving your lambs on the ewes? Are they going out on pasture with the ewes then, or are you weaning them, or what age are you weaning them and so forth?
Okay, yeah, I sure share that with you. So I will do to 130 ewes, and whenever I like the 2 weeks when I turn them out, there's obviously going to be some lambs born the end of December, and then there's some going to be about the 1st of February. And that can be very critical. And then you're going to have some mothers, maybe that will have a ram that's, getting, say, 65, 70 pounds at, 9, 10 weeks. And the ewe might be, 15, 20 pounds lighter. And if you're going to gauge by eyesight, that can get you in trouble maybe on a set of twins where you just wean one and don't wean the other. And I've already had little lambs that will never go to that other side to nurse and will run the udder of that ewe.
Yeah.
So when I turn out, I make sure and keep my dates pretty close. Now, you cannot get slacking on your dates when you're registering or keeping track of your ewes if you're wanting to do it like this. You keep track, and then I will do that. I lamb one time a year. Now, if you're lambing 3 times in 2 years, this probably won't be ideal. But if I'm lambing one time a year, I will let my December and 1st of January babies get all the way to 11, almost 12 weeks of age.
Okay. Yeah.
Due to that, I'm feeding the mother a little grain and she's got good access to hay, they don't run down a whole lot.
Sure.
They do very, very well. And when I start seeing that they're getting a little bit rough on the mother, and that'll be about at 10, 11 weeks, I'll crowd that as long as I can. So when I see, okay, now I've got to do something because they're starting to get a little bit rough on the mother when they're going to nurse. I'll go in and get my little bucklet that I have, and I'll wean all the way back to 7 weeks.
Yeah.
7 weeks of age. Like I'll have one big, just say mass weaning,
Sure.
and that's how I wean.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I was just curious. Are those
And
lambs?
ideal on weaning. So if you have an access to pull those mothers off, it's easier just to pull the mother out and leave the lamb in on the lick feeder. That's ideal. Well, I can't, my setup personally isn't quite, I can't quite do that. That's how I like to do it. I have done it in the past, but it makes it a little rough on me because where I have to put the ewes sometimes isn't very, I can't keep them there long enough, should I say, until they're dry because don't forget, it's February and March and it's wet, and I don't want to turn mine out on pasture quite yet.
Sure.
And so ideal is pulling the mother ewe, letting the lamb stay where he or she's at.
Yeah.
That works. Like you almost don't have any, like if I do that, my problems are very minimal on weaning down to that 7 weeks. I don't lose many after once the lamb is started and going.
That's a pretty good survival rate. I think industry standard is about 10% or something like that.
Now I would lose 10% if you count the ones from birth or one that come backwards or because I count all of that.
Yeah.
I'll count all of that. So I do lose. It's I would say between 10 and 12%. Yes, but
Okay.
what I work very hard on is when that lamb is started nursing on the mother and the mother has adapted, and after that week and a half to 2 weeks, that's what I work on. That's where I really focus on trying to
Gotcha.
save the lamb.
Yeah. Yeah. After you weaned your lambs, are they, I guess, obviously it's February, they're probably staying on the barn. Are they on full feed then? Are they getting some hay, or what are you doing with the lambs after you weaned them?
After I wean, yes, I will. I will sometimes, like I said, I will pull the lambs out of that little split part that I have and bring them back inside into another larger pen. By then I won't have very many mothers left on the inside. Most of my mothers are going to be on the outside. There's even sometimes where that half of that pen will be down to just a small corner, on the outside to just left the lamb. And they almost have that whole barn lot out there.
Yeah,
But when I wean, I will pull them back inside. And yes, I full feed and move on. Like I sell my breeding stock. Now, what I'm selling breeding stock, like if I know I'm selling off 10 or 12 ewes, I will pull them from the full feed and I
sure.
will feed them down a little so they can adapt better.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
just a thing I do. With the rams, I don't have much problem. I just let them in, let the people come by and hand pick them out. I sell an average local here. I sell an average of 15 to 20 rams, for breeding stock a year, just local. I
Yeah.
have a little trade out thing that I have done for years. When they're done with the old ram, they come back and for a small sum will trade their ram back in because I've got a good market for those old rams here.
Yeah. That trade-in program's an interesting concept. I'm sure that's
Yeah.
really helpful for your the people that are buying from you. Um, they can just trade in their RAM every
Yep.
few years.
At any time, I told them I don't care if the ram is a 2-year-old or if it's an 8-year-old. Like there's no age limit to it. I said as long as the ram is alive, it's available for trade in at any time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cool program.
And and then on the full feed, I'll go back and touch that up a little bit. I will feed full feed, but now I will start to restrict on the universal feeder. And my biggest praise, like that I love about the universal feeder. So I used to do creep feeding, like in any trough. I've tried it through gates, which was the best way if you're going to do trough. Sticking the head through the gate is the best way if you're going to do trough. Or, in the pen. And if you're going to try to max out your lambs on feed, trough feeding full feed is almost, to me, was hopeless. Like I wasted more feed that I could have fed out another 20 lambs with. And when I went to the universal feeder, the universal feeder itself paid off on the feed that I saved from waste the very first year. Where,
Wow.
on the lambs, I even, put, when I had the troughs inside, I put a little T-post up in my trough and put a little on top so they can't walk in it. Put a little small, like 2x4 on top about just so they can get their heads in there. Well, everybody knows how a lamb is. If you walk around the outside of a lamb, or let's say there's a cat jumps off of a gate, it's going to scare that lamb, and that lamb will try to shoot through that hole, and it'd dump my feeder out, and I'd lose my feed. Then I
Yeah.
tried feeding through the gate. I tried multiple things and many things on the self feeders. Even the red cane feeders, your wall feeders, they will still stand in there and try to eat out of the top, or one will just stand in it to stand on it. And goats are still way worse than lambs on it, but you always had they wouldn't eat that top feed because they was standing there, or there'd be a clump in it you'd have to clean out.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeding your ewes at that time, there's really nowhere to go with it, and not always just get a couple buckets. I would always go out and feed it to my ewes, but not everybody might have 130 ewes to feed them to. But
Yeah.
it was an extra chore where, once these lambs are on full feed with the universal feeder, I might maybe 2 times a week, maybe run my finger through there. And like right now, I have several 90 and 95 pound lambs here, ram lambs. I'm waiting on a couple guys to come pick up. I've got it restricted to where I can just barely get my, I can get my index finger through there, but like right now I couldn't get my thumb through there. Like I've got it restricted down to there, and they're still laying on their side, chewing their cud with their big guts. They're still happy.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's
So
huge. If you start wasting feed like that, that's gonna power up real quick.
yep, because I will go through, at one time this time after I had at the 130 ewes, I think I had weaned about 220 ish. Wasn't quite 200%. It's about 100. I average weaning between 160 and 180%. At that first weaning, I had at one time I had about, I think it was right around 220 lambs
Okay.
in that, and when I brought them inside, I had those all on one universal feeder. Now, I don't recommend that, okay? But if you do that, if you do put like the 100 lambs on one of those 800 universal feeders, at that time I still had a couple troughs screwed to the wall, and I would go, because you will start getting bigger lambs and the small lambs can't get in. I recommend to make sure no more, like my number is no more than 75, and this is a pretty high number, but I have got along with it good.
Yeah.
Between 65 and 75 lambs per an 800 series.
Yeah, that's more
100
realistic.
you will get a little bit. These dominant ram lambs will start bullying around a little bit, but they don't on 75. But don't let your feeder run out.
Yep.
Because it'll take me at average, like, which has happened to me, of course, it always happens, seems like, but it'll take me 48 hours. Like, if you don't go get a trough and you'll feed them and you get them, they will fight that feeder for 48 hours till they get caught up. And then you will have some that will eat too much because they was hungry. Just don't let it run out. If you're putting that amount of lambs per the feeder, that's another little pointer that I have there.
Yep.
So how do you these lambs you're buying in, these feeder lambs, how do you go about acclimating them?
You mean like getting them adjusted to the feeder?
Right.
Yeah. So when we buy these in, ideal is 35 to 45 pound lambs.
Mm-hmm.
That is ideal for us. And so anybody who has ever, growing out these lambs, you can't take no chances. Like if you're wanting to succeed in it, you can't take no chances that these lambs had their CD&T, their overeating, their Clostridium, protection, the tetanus protection. You cannot chance it that they had it. You have to give them the CD&T. We personally, I know the recommended dosage is 2 cc per head. We will give 3, sometimes it's almost 4 that they get, because when we sit down and we go through and we give these vaccine shots, to the lambs that we buy in, every now and then one's jumping straight up and down. But ideally is I'm targeting them for 3 cc. So that's what, so we will give that. We don't ever give the second shot there. We will just give the one. Now, I give my back after a bit, I will give my lambs at home, my breeder quality stuff, I will give them the second shot. But these feeder lambs that I'm buying in at a different location is 1 dosage of the CD&T, but I'll give them 3 cc. I've never talked to a vet on it if it's, something that's helping me out more or not. It's just something I do.
Yeah.
So
The podcast we did a little while ago, I was told that if I'm only doing the 1 shot, I might as well just be squirting it on the floor. So I don't know. It made me rethink my program a little bit.
Yeah. So at home we have no problems with we can use whatever brand we want to. But these feeder lambs we're buying in, if we don't use the Colorado brand CD&T, we will have more problems with the bar back. I don't know why. And if you look at the CD&T, if you look at that coloring, the Barvac will be a lot whiter and like a whitish color to it. And then the CD&T will be a more clear. Ideally, you think the Barvac would carry, better, but we seem to have a lot more still after 2 weeks when we're adjusting these in that these lambs will still overeat. Now, it could be, like you guys said, that it's not from the second shot. I'm not going to argue that that's not the case. It could very well be that. But if we give the Cardo Ratto brand, which is the more expensive brand, and we give that 3cc, we're not, the overeating is not our problem. Now, we will transition into full feed over 2 to 3 weeks. Never try, like me personally, will never ever try again. Believe me, we have tried to do it faster than that. We have also tried using the universal feeder, and I think me and Leon had talked about this, to allow this to be, don't go out and buy a set of feeder lambs and go turn them in on your universal feeder and try to restrict them. That is still not, it's just not ideal. They will, ours still did overeat on the universal feeder, and we had it restricted pretty good.
Yeah, the problem there is
hand feed, yes.
Yeah, hand feed to start them, because you don't know where,
absolute must.
Because you don't know where those lambs are at. You don't know what their diet was previously, and you're just going to run into, even if you restrict it down really, really tight, you're going to have some animals are going to figure it out right away. Some won't figure it out for 2 weeks. And in the meantime, you might have opened it up some more. And now suddenly those lambs that didn't figure it out do figure it out, and they get hit with too much feed. You're going to have acidosis problems.
You are 100% correct. That is 100% correct.
Now, one thing you could do is if you started those lambs on a very safe ration, something like soy hull pellets, then you could open it up pretty wide and get all the animals acclimated to the feeder, know where the feed is, know how it works. They don't have to work very hard to get it because you have it open far enough. And then you can start adjusting it down, and then you put in your ration. That would be, that's another option. And I recommend the soy hull pellets as that's probably the best way to acclimate stock to a saliva lick feeder, because the soy hulls, the rumen processes them very much like a forage, and they're very, very forgiving. You could almost take lambs and give them free choice access to soy hulls cold turkey with no problem.
It is the closest thing to hay that you can find. Soy hull pellets.
Right.
Our thing is, when we get these lambs in, they have got, like, we will not grain them an ounce for an entire day. We give them nothing but good hay. Now, the key word here is good hay, because I'm going to give you guys a little information here on a local what had just happened. And he was losing some lambs, that he was growing out. And I've heard it around here. And this is more than one place that has had this exact same report. And these are sent in lambs to the lab to figure out what's going on. Because they're losing these 35-pound lambs, and it's not pneumonia, it's not overeating. They can worm them all they want, and they'll still die off. And a lot of guys get frustrated over it, and it's happened in the past from us. And I kind of have finally put 2 plus 2 together. And now, this is nothing that is confirmed. I want this very, open on my part of it. But now it has been confirmed on 2 of the other locals. But I'm just assuming that's what had happened to me. We had brought some lambs in. We was hand feeding them. And we had 100-some of these 35-pound lambs we brought on, and we lost like 20 over a 2-week period, and we could not get them to up on their grain. Anything we would try, they'd come down with the diarrhea. We wormed them with minor 2 or 3 times. Some would kill off within 2 days, and they'd get anemic, and it was just a mess. And I just kind of kicked it to the side and didn't worry about it. Thought, so I was a bad batch. Well, a couple months later, I hear one of my friends local here had the same thing was happening. He had sent one of his in, and it had come back that the report had come back that it had starved to death. And he said, well, how on earth can that happen? He was feeding them some a little bit and transitioning them into feed, and they had all the hay they wanted. They said, well, the hay that this sheep, like this lamb, had in its gut had no value. It was taking more out of the lamb to digest it than what the hay was putting in.
Wow. So basically they were feeding them straw.
They was feeding straw. The hay had no value. Now, if you are buying your hay and you have people that are not taking care of their soil and they're just taking it off every year and not fertilizing it or putting in minerals and stuff to it, it might not be there yet, but it could get to there, because that was the same time that I had to buy a load of hay in. And the hay wasn't ideal. It was just didn't look as good as our personal hay here does at home. And now, I'm thinking that's what it was.
Yeah, that's where taking a forage test of the hay would be really helpful. Especially if you're, guys that are growing their own hay, it's not as important, especially once you kind of have a baseline for your farm. But it can still vary a lot. It can surprise you. But if you're buying in hay, you really should be doing forage tests, because you don't know. You don't know where that grass is coming from. So it's a cheap way to avoid problems like that. But that's
But we did have 2 locals now that have confirmed on that hay, that their lamb that they sent in there had no worms, parasites. They're flat starved to death. And they had all the availability there that they could have had on hay, but they was it was minimal feed. It was minimal feed, because they was trying to transition them over.
Sure. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that good quality hay in those young wean lambs. When I wean lambs, I like to make sure they have a pretty good quality hay there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That is it. That fescue, and I feel like I said, for the fescue and the alfalfa mix. And when you bring them lambs in, they will just tank out on that second cutting fescue. I mean, they just pow to it. And we give them all they want for that first 24 hours. We give them all they want all the time, but that first 24 hours, that's the only thing they get. And they'll come in, thin. You can tell some of them, was out on grass, or grass lambs. They're these 55-pound lambs. They're little thin, little runny stool. We will. You fill that gut with dry hay, it's just it'll be a total different lamb. Yep, it'll be a total different lamb. And we do all our feeding on this program that I buy. We do it indoors. And into another turkey barn that's about a 3/4 mile from my house, half mile, 3/4 mile from my house. But we have got access. We've got a fan, a big 4x4 fan in there, and we can the old curtains, the old side curtains, we will lift up in the summertime. We can still lift those up in the summertime, so they do have somewhat ventilation.
Well,
now that being said,
is that curtain just
go ahead on the curtains?
Is the curtain the length of the building, or is it just at a certain spot?
It is the entire length of the building, but we are just we're only feeding about 350, 400 max lambs on one. We have got I think it is 18 to 20 feet by. It's about a 20 by 20 square, and we will run if we get tight. If we would get tight on that 20 by 20 square, we would have, I don't know, 70 lambs in there. 70, 75 lambs in there, and then we make sure and keep it dry. That's a must on the indoors, to keep it dry with shavings or sawdust or straw, whatever you have. But the curtain is the entire length of the building. We will only raise it, down by the lambs. if we know it's going to rain or storm or an evening, we will drop it on the south side. The fan will run during this, doesn't run much in the winter, but in the spring, summer, and fall, it will almost run continuously. That we just to circulate air.
Yeah.
And yeah. That being said, on the indoor, we do still have pneumonia cases. It is something that we have just kind of growing to deal with and accept. I do not give them. I've been hearing some things. I haven't paid much attention to it. It's something I'm probably going to get to soon on that pneumonia vaccine that they're talking about now, and been hearing some reports on it.
Yeah,
definitely probably.
Pneumonia's definitely always going to be a challenge when you're indoors. Even if we get a pneumonia vaccine,
Mhm.
There's going to be different strains, and it'll help maybe, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yep.
that's something we have.
That's why because that's when I had talked to a fella about it. He was telling me the same thing. He's saying he don't know which strain. He said he would try it on like a group of 70 and see
Yeah,
what that's how we would do it. We would try it on a group of 70. We wouldn't just go through and shoot everything up.
sure.
No, we tried to minimize our all our antibiotics. We try to minimize it, but there is circumstances. If you have a lamb that's sitting there with his ears down that's pupping, if you don't give him a Draxton or a Nufilor shot, you're probably going to lose that lamb.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go and just, this lamb here is feeling good.
So these lambs you have in these 20 by 20 pens, you must have various sections. You must have your barn divided up into sections, apparently.
Yeah,
My
so we
understanding
have
it
the
right?
bottom. It's about 160 feet, and we would have we got 5 pins on the south side, and then we have one goat pen on the north side. And why I call it a goat pen is because it's the 6-foot wire instead of the 3-foot wire on the land. So we got the goats. You got if it don't hold water, it won't hold a goat, right? So
Yeah.
we do feed out some goats too, but we do have a goat pen on the north side, and then we've got 3 more lamb pens. Yeah, we have got sections.
Hey, you hear that, goat guy listeners? We're talking about goats. Just wanted to make sure everybody caught that.
Yeah.
We have some goat guys that would like a little more goat material to listen to.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
you probably treat the goats a lot the same in your feed out program, I suppose.
Yes. Yes. But a goat, if you're going to treat a goat, so with the goats, it's a lot similar, but still there's a difference. With a goat, if you think she's not feeling good, she's not feeling good. But yeah, we got a universal feeder in for the goats. So
Yeah, interesting. How are you
yeah,
feeding hay? How are you feeding your hay in these in your goats and lambs?
in the front, we've got a hallway in the front of these pens, and we can roll a bale out in the hallway, and we've got little V holding panels, and I used that too before. Uh, hot dip galvanized panel that I cut about 18 or 20 by 5 foot. It's a 5 foot tall panel, and they'll cut it, about 20 inches, and they'll V it into their front gate.
Gotcha.
And then we fill it. We fill it every night and morning, fresh hay.
So are you feeding hay the whole way through on these feeder lambs, or is that just to
Yeah.
help them get acclimated?
Yeah, but it's pretty remarkable the amount that they go through right when we get them in. You would think it would stay similar.
Yeah.
But these little 30-pound and 45-pound that we get in will go through just as much as this 95-pounder that's on full feed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's but they use about the same much all the way through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's once they get going on that grain, they won't eat near as much hay. So, yeah.
Yep. And a lot of guys say, why don't you restrict your lambs a little more than you do? Well, where I'm selling, the fatter the better for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I take him in and he's going to dock me a quarter a pound for a number 2 nice fleshy lamb, but isn't fat, then I might as well would have, I didn't gain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I take him to a local market here, and he wants them lambs fat when they come in there.
Yeah.
So that's what we try to get him.
Why don't we talk a little bit about, well, let's talk first of all about where are you buying in these kids and lambs? Is that just at the local sale barn, or do you have regular suppliers that you're buying them from? And then also, I'd like to talk a little bit about your market, as much as
Okay.
you're willing to share there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Buying in, it is a local sale barn here, in southern Indiana, that's kind of southwestern Indiana here. Dinkies is the local barn that I buy from there. It's every Friday night, and I will go there Friday night. Some nights we come home with a handful of lambs and 2 goats,
Yeah.
but we attend it every Friday night. And then the next night you might come home with, 30 or 40. And we will treat that, let's say that night that we buy a handful of lambs, we will just put that handful of lambs, we'll give them an extra week. We'll make them adapt to the week that's behind them, because you can't push them forward. If you push them forward, they'll overeat.
Yeah.
That's kind of how and that's the difference for the different pens.
Yeah.
We've got like 3 or 4 starting pens before they go into the universal feeder pen where they're on full feed. And
Yeah.
then at sometimes, when we're full, then we won't, obviously we can't buy. And then we have enough of universal feeders to put in that one in every pen. But the other places, so I buy some out of Springfield there in Kentucky. I don't get many from Bowling Green. Occasionally some Bowling Green. It's in Shipshewana. Some. I mean, it's. I'm sure you guys have heard of Brewer Livestock, right?
Actually, I can't say I have.
You say
Okay.
Brewer?
Brewer Livestock and
Yeah,
Brewer.
I've
Yeah.
heard of him. Yeah, I've heard of him.
Okay. Yeah. Livestock here in North. I'm just about an hour, about 2 hours from him, and ever since I've been taking lambs to him now for about probably 15 or 20 years. 15 years probably wouldn't been quite 20 because it'd been about 5 years there till we got frustrated to take them, trying to find a good place and good market until I got hooked up there with Donnie, and he will pretty consistently call me and say, hey, I've got 75 50-pound lambs over here that need some attention. Can you handle them? And he'll send them to me. Like he'll ship them to me.
Mm-hmm.
Those are rough. Those ones that come in there, that's rough business there.
Yeah.
I will almost always lose 10 to 15% of those. And Donnie, he occasionally, will help me out a little bit on as far as, pricing, depending on what the market is, depending on what he paid for them, he tries to do the best he can on them. I, thank him for that and everything. But when they come in there, I'm actually trying to work with him right now on getting the feed. I see he's got them on full feed over there, but it's a fiber feed. It's like a 30% fiber feed that he has, and I'm working with him right now to axe that. I want him to get the feed out of it, and I want him to put in hay or something else other than a grain feed. Because if we get in 70 lambs from him, there'll be 5 of them running fever from Clostridium. And I don't know if anybody knows or has ever dealt with Clostridium or tried to get a lamb with Clostridium. That is a challenge.
Yeah.
That's probably our main source. I've got right now, and then he knows when he sells to me, I'm going to be bringing them back to him. So that's
Okay. So you go back to
I'll buy them from him,
Yeah.
and then I take them. I'll take them back to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious with buying in lambs from, that many different sources. Um, what is your death loss on lambs, or I don't know, what are you comfortable sharing on that. It's
So
not.
so
Let
at,
me
at,
just
at
say
the end of the year, if you're up from what you was the year before, you keep going, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So every now and then we'll get in. I mean, it happens, and it just got done happen. We had got in a load, and these was farm fresh. This is what beats me out. These was farm fresh, and we got in about 35 lambs that we would have lost about 11 off of. And I mean, there is no explaining to. They just flat would not want to. They did not want to live. You are going to have death loss. Okay, it's just something that I always tell the guy who helped me. He sometimes gets very frustrated in it, and I tell him, I said, "Hey, man, I said, look, did you done this? You gave him, the water was clean, the hay was there, and the feed was there. The, you know, we wormed them, we gave them their, their CD&T, and it would even been they would have died off. They would have died off before the second CD&T went into effect. If I would even gave them the second CD&T. So
Sure.
let me give you a little theory what I think's going on here. And some other growers can relate to this. So if you're buying from a sale barn, like I do, there's some of these lambs will come in that look nice and slick and fat, just rolling fat. And this is what makes it so bad for these feeder buyers. Those are actually the ones that we have to be careful with, because there'll be some people that will turn these lambs in on full feed the night before they bring them to the sale barn. And you get them, and 2 days later, you got full blowing diarrhea, and these lambs just with their heads down, got gut ache. It's a terrible situation there. You don't know why somebody would do that, but that also keeps us from paying more for them because we don't know.
Sure.
And it's just something that no matter how hard you have a farmer that's trying, then you'll have one bad egg that'll ruin all these others that are trying hard.
Yeah.
That's about as plain as I want to talk about it, because
Sure.
I feel like that's what happened with this group of 35.
Yeah.
I got them bought for a decent price, and when these things come in, it wasn't a matter of 3 days. They was feeling very, very unwell. So
Yeah.
it is. But on the death loss, we tried to keep the death loss under 10 or 15%.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like the last load I got from Donnie, I got 72 head in. I lost 3.
Yeah.
That's not.
Now I had a rodeo with about 10 of them, but I lost 3 out of those 72 head. One died within, like let's say 3 or 4 hours after I got him off the trailer. Another one died in pneumonia within the next day, and one of them was my fault.
Yeah. What I guess what I was worried about would be, when you're buying in different groups of lambs at different times, is that you would bring something in that would kind of spread through your whole barn and you have a mess with everybody. Now you are keeping
Okay.
them separate pens. Like, are they completely isolated where they can't have any fence line contact even? And also like your clean out procedure is probably pretty important with that.
Yes. So we are. Yes. So we do start individual, like pins, and like, are you talking about like ORF and pink eye and so forth? Is that what you're kind of targeting with, or what kind of disease?
Yeah, like anything. I mean, yeah, Pengai would
Yeah.
definitely be one.
Yeah.
Even
So pink
pneumonia.
eye.
Even like if you bring a different, like if you bring a different strain of pneumonia in, I would think that could go through your flock. Um,
Uh-huh.
hoof rot. I mean, I guess hoof rot's manageable if you're buying in sheep. It's
Yeah.
something you're dealing with.
Yeah. So
Uh,
with my home lambs, like I have no problem with the hoof rot whatsoever. But so on
sure.
these lambs that come in, there'll be some that get down on their knees and they can't get around.
Yeah.
We'll do what needs to be done. We'll get in there. We'll trim that hoof up. We'll give him a little bit of we'll give that one particular a little bit of LA-200, and that will take care of that one that can't get out.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, if he's down on 2 knees where he's not going to gain, or he's holding one leg up in the back, we'll treat it. Like, we'll take care of it. We'll go in there. We'll do that, what's needed. On the pink eye, I had my vet in on that because I was going to, I'm going to kick that to the curb every time I come in there. He said, well, come on, we can treat him. It'll be better in 3 weeks, or you can sit there and watch it and it'll be better in 21 days.
Yeah.
So that's how we treat the pink eye.
Yeah.
In 3 weeks, we can treat it. In 3 weeks, it'll be better, or you wait around in 21 days, it'll be better.
Yeah.
Now, if you have one that gets a total white eye, like gets the complete white eye, I'll shoot a little penicillin in that eye, like just a couple drops, and I feel like that will sometimes help it with the ones that get real bad. And then on the ORF, that is exactly the same as your pink eye. It will run its course. Do we lose lambs from it? A timid small lamb sometimes.
Yeah.
But very seldom do we lose lambs from ORF. Now, you will lose a goat or two if they get ORF before they're started. And that ORF, for anybody, like if they don't know what it is, it's sore mouth. We don't just throw our lambs in here and say go for it. We take care of these lambs. If the guy who's helping me, if he can't, he does almost all of it now. But if he says, hey, I've got a pneumonia in pen 5 and I need check this one here in pen 6. After all my chores and stuff are done, I'll change into my feeder boots and go up there and do what I do, and then I go in the house and I'll be done for the evening. That's kind of how I keep my place and that place separate. I'll make sure I got everything done at my house before I go up there and take care of his whatever he couldn't get done for the evening or something.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to point out to our listeners is that separation you're keeping from these feeder lambs that you're buying in from your home flock, because like we talked about, when you're buying in feeder lambs, you're bringing stuff in with that.
There's stuff there. I'm not gonna try to run around the curb. If you're going to do any feeder lamb or buy at any sale barns, and you're going to try to prevent this from entering, you won't be feeding things out long. So
anything you would like to add, either of you, before we wrap this up?
It's there's not a whole lot that I would. It's I mean, the biggest thing is, if you enjoy it, you have to enjoy it to do it. And I really, really enjoy it. And there's nothing like much easier if you got, like I said, a good fence, goats. I don't want to downgrade the goats, because right now, what are goats? $4 a pound on a lot of your $3.50, $4 a pound, compared to the lambs being $2 2.25 to $2.75 ish.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know my prices. I haven't heard anything in about 2 weeks now, because I've not been to the market in a while. But last I heard, but goats can be good money too. There's nothing easier to take care of than your goats and your sheep. Equivalent to this is my personal opinion, to a cow. Where a cow is gonna what 1 cow per acre compared to maybe 8 to 10 goats and sheep per acre. To me, it's do your math.
Yeah.
But cows are with the prices of everything, so beef cows and everything is definitely up there too. But it's as far as ease, I'm definitely take with being in the sheep industry.
Yeah.
Very good. Well,
And
thanks.
on the one more thing on the universal feeders. It's not really just for an advertisement for you guys. It is the truth on easy and saving. It really, really helped us out on saving a feed, like from waste.
That's very good. So, hey, Lamar, it's good to chat with you and hear how the feeders are working out for you. It's always good to hear happy customers, and also interesting to hear how you do things there with both your feeder lambs and your production flock. Thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate it.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
guys a lot too.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening, folks, to another episode of the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Lost Creek Wholesale, your universal feeder distributor. If you want more information on our universal feeders, or if you want to find a dealer near you, visit our website, www.lostcreekwholesalellc.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch up with you next time.